If you care about how societies actually survive pressure, chaos, and prolonged crisis, you're in the right place. Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed to Iron Age Instincts, because this channel exists for people who don't want surface-level history. We look at the mechanics behind survival, control, and human behavior under stress. And today's topic is one of the most quietly powerful forces in modern history. How governments measured civilian morale, and how they deliberately shaped it to keep societies functioning. When people think about morale in wartime or crisis, they often picture vague feelings like hope or fear. Authorities never treated morale as vague. They treated it as a measurable resource, almost like fuel. By the early 20th century, governments understood that tanks, factories, and food supplies were useless if civilians psychologically collapsed. The result was an entire hidden infrastructure designed to monitor public mood, identify psychological weak points, and intervene before dissent or despair became uncontrollable. Why morale became a strategic resource rather than an emotional afterthought is the first thing to understand. Industrialized warfare and mass societies meant wars were no longer fought only by soldiers. Civilians worked the factories, rationed food, endured bombings, and accepted restrictions on daily life. If civilian cooperation broke down, production slowed, strikes erupted, black markets expanded, and trust in authority evaporated. Leaders learned quickly that morale directly affected output, obedience, and long-term resilience. That realization changed governance permanently. How authorities actually measured morale is, well, far more systematic than most people realize. Governments relied heavily on direct observation through surveys, letters, and reports. During the Second World War, British officials collected thousands of intercepted civilian letters, not for military intelligence, but to gauge emotional tone. Complaints about food, anger toward officials, jokes about leadership, and expressions of exhaustion were categorized and tracked over time. In the United States, polling organizations worked closely with government agencies to measure fear, confidence, and willingness to sacrifice. These were not just casual opinion polls. They were morale diagnostics. Another overlooked method involved local officials and workplace monitoring. Factory supervisors, civil defense wardens, teachers and clergy were, quietly encouraged to report mood shifts. Rising absenteeism, increased alcohol use, family disputes, or rumors spreading through neighborhoods were treated as early warning signs. When these indicators spiked, authorities assumed morale was slipping, even before people openly protested. For anyone studying survival psychology, this is critical behavior changes before language does. How morale was manipulated once weaknesses were identified followed clear patterns. Information control was the first lever. Bad news was rarely eliminated, but it was carefully framed. Losses were acknowledged selectively, often paired with narratives of endurance or future payoff. This wasn't accidental optimism. It was calibrated messaging designed to keep fear below paralysis while maintaining enough threat to justify sacrifice. When bombing intensified in Britain, for example, messaging shifted from promises of safety to appeals to toughness and shared suffering, because denial no longer matched reality. Ritual and routine became another major tool. Authorities understood that predictable schedules stabilize the human nervous system. Ration books, blackout drills, radio broadcasts at fixed times, and public slogans all reinforced a sense of order. Even when conditions worsened, routine signaled continuity. From a survivalist perspective, this is actionable knowledge. In any prolonged crisis, maintaining structured daily habits is not comfort theatre, it is psychological armour. Social pressure was also deliberately engineered. Governments amplified stories of model citizens who endured cheerfully, worked harder, or sacrificed more. These examples were not meant to inspire admiration alone. They created behavioural benchmarks. Once a standard of acceptable endurance was publicly established, social shame did much of the enforcement work. People complied not just because the state demanded it, but because deviation risked social exclusion. What's especially important for serious historians is recognizing that manipulation didn't always mean deception. Sometimes morale was strengthened by genuine responsiveness. When surveys showed anger over ration inequality, adjustments were made. When fatigue peaked, rest campaigns and entertainment were introduced. Morale management was not purely coercive. It was adaptive. Authorities learned that ignoring emotional data led to rebellion, while limited concessions preserved legitimacy. How this knowledge applies today is where this topic becomes more than academic. Modern crises, whether economic shocks, pandemics, or supply disruptions, follow similar psychological patterns. Governments still track mood through polls, social media sentiment, workplace data, and consumer behaviour. Messaging still balances fear and reassurance. For individuals and small groups focused on resilience, understanding these mechanisms allows you to separate real conditions from morale-shaping narratives. So, practically speaking, you can apply this by, monitoring your own behavioural signals during stress. Track changes in your sleep, irritability, consumption habits, and even your attention span. These are, in fact, the same indicators authorities watch at scale. It's wise to build personal routines early in a crisis rather than, waiting for stability to return. And do your best to limit exposure to repetitive messaging designed to amplify emotional responses. And within your own family or group, use clear communication and a shared sense of purpose to maintain morale organically, rather than letting external narratives define your emotional state. The deeper lesson here is, uncomfortable but empowering. Civilian morale has always been managed because, quite frankly, it works. Understanding that doesn't make you cynical. It makes you prepared. History shows that those who recognize morale as a resource are better equipped to protect it when pressure mounts. If you found this breakdown useful and want more deep, serious analysis like this, subscribe to Iron Age Instincts. Share this with people who actually care about how societies hold together under strain, and keep sharpening your understanding of the forces that shape human survival.